Hi, everybody. Hi, campers. Today, we're going to actually make spaghetti meatballs together with a huge twist. What? There's no actual meat in the meatballs. We're going to use meat that's made out of plants. So we're going to do something that's completely kind of new to the whole world. And it helps so many people with different diets enjoy spaghetti and meatballs. And we're calling them Impossiballs because it's impossible how delicious they are. And they don't have the normal set of ingredients. All right, so let's get class going with my dear friend Cappy. I think Cappy's going to cook along. This is your mise en place. All of your things in place. Everything you need to cook, you gather before you begin to cook, and then we can be calm. Then we can be calm when we're cooking because we know we have everything we need right next to us and very close. You put this down here.
I did the same thing, Rach. I took a little baking sheet that I have at home and prepped out each part of the recipe just like that.
Here's our sauce, and that was the prep for the meatballs. Now, for our sauce, here's our basic ingredients. Basil, tomatoes, garlic. Oh, garlic. A little butter, some olive oil, which I keep in a cruet, and I've already put a little in our pot. It's getting warm, but not hot. And the basil. Now, basil doesn't really like it to be too cold. It doesn't like the cold at all. It gets kind of black. It kind of digs hanging out at room temperature. So this basil, I put in water just like flowers. Okay? And I keep it underneath a big plastic bag, and that keeps it kind of nice and fresh. Smell that, Jen? It smells like flowers when you take the bag off. Yeah. You can smell it. And you save the bag, you just put it off to the side, and we'll take what we need in a little bit. We have our spaghetti. If we're cooking for more than 4 people, we need more than 1 package of spaghetti. So we're going to use 1 pound of spaghetti today because we're just cooking for me and John and my mom, so 3 people. But we're gonna make enough sauce that we can have leftovers, and you can make meatball subs, Impossible subs. We can share with friends and give leftovers to them like we do every day here. We share with all of our friends and neighbors. We give away our food. So if you want to make a lot, you're going to use 2. Oh, I just spilled the water all over John. He hates that. John thinks water stains. It doesn't, but he does. He's very scared of water. Don't be scared of water.
I'm like the Wicked Witch of the West. I'm scared of water.
And here's our garlic. Now, great tip about garlic. When we bring it home, here's what we do. We take the whole bowl and we push really hard on it. And if you're too little and you're super skinny, mom or dad may need to help you with that. And you break up the garlic into cloves. This is a bulb. These are cloves. And then when we knock the cloves with a knife, look what happens. When we put a knife on top and give it a little bounce, then the skin, I call it the jacket comes off. So then we have peeled garlic. Now, anytime we want to make fresh food, you know what makes it easier? If things are ready and waiting for you. So if we have a little container always of garlic that's ready to go, oh, what a time saver. So every time the container gets empty, get more garlic ready to cook. Now for the sauce, we're going to need a couple of cloves of garlic, 2 large or 3 or 4 small, okay? For the meatballs, we want to grate a couple, and I'll explain that in a minute. So we're gonna want a couple more cloves for that. So when it comes to garlic, we can do a few different things. For the tomato sauce, we can put the knife flat on top of the garlic. Hold it firmly with one hand, and with the heel by your thumb of your other hand, hit it and smush it. Just smush it right across the table and see how it breaks up like that, okay? Or we can slice it. And how do we slice something small? How do we slice anything, big or small? We keep our fingers curled under like a cat paw, and we get a good firm grip, and we tip the knife just a tiny bit away from our fingers so we don't cut ourselves. So we can slice, or we can smush the garlic. Look at this, we got even another option. We can take a grater. That means a bunch of little knives, so be careful and don't get your knuckles of your thumb or your fingertips too close. We can also take a grater and grate garlic.
That's what I'm going to do, Rach.
What a great idea. Look at all those different ways we can deal with garlic. Now, lots of people say, I don't like garlic. Sometimes that could be a food allergy, or maybe it doesn't make their tummy feel good. Sometimes it could be that the garlic is burnt or cooked at too high a temperature too quickly. And if garlic gets burnt, if it doesn't smell good, it's never going to taste good. If it doesn't smell good, we have to start all over. Garlic is one of those items that once it gets into the pores, just like the skin on your body has pores, it's a living, breathing thing. It's an organ of your body. There are pores in a pot, and they're little teeny tiny holes you can't see with your eye. It looks totally flat, but there's little teeny tiny holes. So if something tastes bad, some things, especially if they're attached to oil, can get into the pores of the pot. That's not good for anybody, and it's certainly not good for the taste of your food. So we have to start over and cook calmly from the beginning over a little less heat. Now, wouldn't it be ironic if I've got my pot too hot because I'm talking too much? Anyway, into the olive oil, I'm going to add some butter. Now, why do we put butter into olive oil? Because olive oil has a slightly higher, if it's olive oil that isn't extra virgin, if it's olive oil you can see through, olive oil has a slightly higher cooking temperature than butter. If we add butter to olive oil, when it melts, it won't burn as quickly as if it would if you just put butter in the pot. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. And we're going to swirl, 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 just like that. Okay, and we have the stove on pretty low heat. This is on medium low. Now we're going to stir, stir, stir our garlic. This is all for the base of the sauce. Tomato basil sauce is the easiest thing in the world, and never, ever, ever buy it out of a jar. Now we're going to add tomatoes, 2 big cans. These are 2 big cans of tomatoes, and see how they say DOP, Pomodoro San Marzano? That means that they're official, it's super sweet, sugary Italian tomatoes. Doesn't matter if we don't have these. We can use good old American tomatoes. They're delicious, but they're not quite as sweet. So you might want to add a pinch of sugar or a tiny drizzle of honey. They just may not be quite as sweet, that's all. We added 2 big cans of tomatoes. So now to our pot, we're going to add this funny stuff. This is a container of passata, P-A-S-S-A-T, passata. This just means pureed fresh tomatoes. You can also use tomato puree or tomato sauce. Tomato sauce often has added sugars. Passata usually does not. So we're going to add about 3 cups. We're making a lot of tomato sauce because we want leftovers. Who doesn't want leftover meatballs or Impossiballs with tomato sauce? Because we can do so much with them. So we're going to add 1 full jar, about 3 cups, to our pot. And we're going to save that jar in the sink so we can rinse it out before we recycle it or reuse it in other ways. Sometimes I put flowers in it and they come up with different creative things to do with leftover
That's
plastic.
a good idea.
Yeah, or store your basil or your flowers, exactly. So now we're going to take some basil and a good handful. And we're going to hold it over the pot and tear in the leaves. Basil doesn't like the cold. It also doesn't necessarily love to be chopped too much. There are exceptions, and I love to chiffonade or chop basil in pretty ways and do fun things with it. But generally speaking, if you're making a sauce, it's fine to just tear some and throw it in. You'll get the flavor. So now we have, what, in about 5 minutes or so, tomato basil sauce. Now we're going to.
You're not a dried basil fan, that's right?
I like lots of dried herbs and spices. I have a huge amount of them, and we're going to use some today. But no, I do not care for dried basil because I feel, to me, it tastes different in too noticeable of a way from fresh. And it's one of very few exceptions. I use dried rosemary, I use dried parsley, dried dill, thyme, sage, all in a pinch. One thing I just choose not to make something that needs basil is if I don't have fresh basil. So now we have our sauce and we're going to add some salt. I use kosher salt. You can use fine sea salt, a couple of good pinches and a little over your shoulder for luck. And now our sauce is done and we're going to let this simmer. We're going to let it come up to a bubble and cook down while our meatballs or Impossiballs are cooking in the oven. I'm going to add a little water to my pasta pot because my water's at a full boil and we need a few more minutes before we can cook the spaghetti. Okay, so now we're going to start our meatballs. And what's going to make that easy is that we already have that tray of all of our ingredients all together and waiting for us. So here it is, and it's coming back. Okay, so before we mix the meatballs, there's a few things I wanted to remind you of on this tray. You probably already learned from all your other camp counselors. I'm going to be like, wow, that's so boring and that's so old news. But we are going to talk about dry measure versus wet measure and scales and eggs, just a couple little things, okay? So, I do not measure for recipes. And I think that as you become an adult cook or a young chef, or you're a rocket scientist who just likes to cook on weekends, I think that Marcella Hazan, who is a very famous cook and chef, very important lady to me, she said it best. Sometimes cooking with measurements is like putting a bird in a cage. That being said, we need measurements for many things. Pasta, bread, baking, all kinds of recipes. Measurements are actually important because some recipes in cooking are like science, and they will only work if you get the science right. So math and science is always important, okay? Other recipes, like making meatballs or spaghetti sauce, not that important. But it is important to know the difference and when to use those tools, and how, if you're not going to use those tools, what does it look like? Here's what I mean. So these are dry measures. What does that mean? A wet measure has a spout. That's how we know it's meant for wet measurements. So this is what we use. We want to measure water, milk, broth, stock, anything liquid, okay? Your liquid measure. For dry measurement, what's the difference? Isn't a cup a cup? Not actually. For dry measurement, you need to be able to level the top off. And it is slightly different. And look, there's no spout. It's going to be difficult and a little messier to pour it out. If you're measuring something that's thick liquid like honey, and I learned this trick from my friend Grant. Hi, Grant, if you're watching. You line this with plastic, put the heavy liquid like molasses or honey in here, and measure it off as if it were dry, but it's a liquid. That's crazy. And it won't get stuck inside if it's in plastic. You poke the bottom, twist the top, poke the bottom, and it squirts out like it was in a honey jar or something. Crazy, but it works. It's a very, really good tip. So if we are using 2 12-ounce packages of Impossible, which is not meat, we'll discuss that in a minute, we're going to use a half a cup of breadcrumbs. Again, I don't measure, but if you never measure, a really smart thing to do is look at what a half a cup looks like. I know it's hard to hear me over all the clamor. Okay, see how we're measuring that off so it's even? Okay, and then you pour it into the bowl, and then once it's in the bowl, oh, that's what a half a cup looks like. If you're using plant-based meat, we're going to use half a cup. If you're using ground sirloin, buy an 80-20 mix, 80% lean and 20% fat. And that's a delicious mix for a meatball. And you can make the recipe the same, but you would need a little more breadcrumb and a little more egg and a little more milk. To the half a cup of breadcrumbs, we're going to add water or milk. I'm using milk to make them moist, okay? And I used about 1/4 of a cup. I didn't measure it. You should put in enough for this to feel moist to your fingers. Whether you love to measure or hate to measure, you have to get your hands dirty when you cook. You must. And
there you go, Mary. Mary had a good question. She was asking about substitutes for milk. So there you go, Mary. Milk, water, just to moisten the bread.
Water, stock. But we are using a lot of grated cheese. So I'm assuming that people are okay with dairy, but there are tons of cheese substitutes too. But we want to loosen that up and get the breadcrumbs nice and moist with our fingertips. When they're nice and moist, it can go in the bowl. Great. Ta-da! Okay.
Wait,
Now,
those are fine breadcrumbs you have there?
They're Italian toasted breadcrumbs, any breadcrumb.
Got it.
Stale bread that you ground up in your food processor. Fine breadcrumbs, panko, any breadcrumb you have is completely fine. You want homemade, store-bought, totally does not matter whatsoever. Okay, little bit of bread though is the point if we're using plant-based meat. So that's what Impossible is, by the way. Can you hand me that package? This, and there are many other varieties out there. This is the one we choose to eat. This is a product that's made out of fermented beans. Crazy, right? But this is plants, and it smells and tastes a whole lot like ground beef. And there are many reasons for that that have to do with our environment, and some that have to do with people's diets. But this is a benefit to a lot of folks. And my husband does eat meat. He loves meat, actually, loves steak and all that. But when it comes to ground meat, he now actually prefers this. He loves these meatballs, and he likes his hamburgers made out of Impossible instead of ground sirloin. But either way, it works. If you're using ground beef, you need 1.5 pounds. If you're using a plant-based product, you need 2 12-ounce packages, okay? Now we're going to add an egg. When we crack eggs, first of all, look at this egg. That's weird, right? Can you see it's blue? It's like blue, like bluish green. These are funny chickens that oftentimes have feathers that stand up on their head like rock stars, like kooky and crazy. And these birds lay blue and green eggs. And depending on what they're fed, sometimes their yolks are really bright orange yellow, and sometimes their yolks are even red. No kidding, crazy. So the important thing is, when we're buying eggs or fruit we're going to eat the skin of, or berries, things like that, if we can, if it's in the family budget, we might want to buy the best quality we can afford, because we're going to eat sometimes eggs that aren't fully cooked. Today we're going to cook them for sure. They're going in the oven. But sometimes we like eggs that are sunny side up or easy over, or in Caesar salad or certain dressings, even sometimes in cocktails John makes. Honestly, he uses raw eggs, so we want to make sure we buy the best quality that we can have. And some people even have chickens of their own. True. Lots of folks have chickens in the backyard. And that's why people care about, oh, where did the egg come from? Or is the egg this color or that color? Or does it matter if it says cage-free or organic or any of those big words on egg packages? That's what that's talking about. Where the egg came from, and are we aware of the food we're eating? And no matter what your budget, that's a good tip. Always be aware of what it is you're eating and how it was prepared. Now we're going to look at the egg in the dish and see if there's any shell. I did a pretty good job. I knocked the egg on the counter and the egg went in, no shell. If there was shell in the bowl, do you know what shell likes? Going home. It likes shell. You put the rest of the shell down in the bowl and the eggshell will come right back to home base. Don't stick your finger in and trying to fish it out. That's probably not gonna work so well. So when we're beating up eggs, poke the yolk, whoop, and then you can use a whisker or fork to poke the yolk and mix it together super, super quick. And we're gonna drop that down in our bowl. So the next thing we're going to do is chop a little parsley. Parsley stems you can save. They're good in stock. They will flavor a stock. And they have a lot more flavor than people think. And the tops of celery, the trimmings from carrots, the trimmings from all of your vegetables, even onion peels, can be delicious if you're making homemade stock from bones of roasted meats or from a whole fresh chicken or turkey. It really does make a huge difference. I wouldn't put a whole fresh turkey in a poach pot, but all of the byproduct, if I'm making a spatchcock turkey and I have byproduct from that. Anytime you're butchering or processing meats of any kind, it's very important to use everything that we have as a resource. And that's one of the great things about cooking. If you learn all of the bits and pieces of it, we can always be turning something into something else, whether that's animal-based or plant-based. And that's how we got Impossible meat, by the way, is by somebody being brilliant with all the things we hadn't thought of that we could do with plants. So with our parsley, we can gather parsley into a little pile and curl our fingers over and chop it. But parsley is one of those things I told you, it's delicious dried. And you can also throw in 1/4 of a cup of dried parsley for this amount of plant-based meat or fresh meat. Or you can chop about 1/2 cup of fresh, either or. And we're going to season our meat from above. So we know we're seasoning the meat or the plant-based meat substitute evenly.
Even season.
And even season, it rhymes. And we can add either black pepper or red pepper or both. They hit different places on your tongue, different flavor receptors in your mouth. We like things a little spicy in this family, so I'm going to add about 1 teaspoon or 1/3 of a palmful of red pepper. I'm also going to add black pepper because I know my family and that's what they like. They like things very spicy.
Hey, Rach.
Yeah.
Kenna and Caitlin want to know if you can use something else instead of red pepper flakes to spice it up.
Yes, black pepper's fine, or a little chili powder if you had to, or a little cayenne pepper. You could just use salt and pepper. That's fine. And now we're going to add something that makes sausage taste like sausage. When you have a sweet Italian sausage, or a plant-based sausage, or a chicken sausage, or a turkey sausage, if it's a sweet Italian sausage, or if you've ever had salami, you probably know what fennel tastes like. But as you work in the kitchen, if something is new to you, smell it as you go. Fennel smells a little bit like licorice, and it smells a little bit like basil. It's delicious, and a little goes a long way. Now, this is fennel pollen that happens when the plant flowers at the top, and we save that and dry it. That's fennel pollen. The seed of the plant is what would come out of that and make it grow again, okay? So here I've got a combination of the two. I use fennel pollen and seed in about a teaspoon. And that's gonna make our meatballs almost taste like a cross between a meatball and a sausage, and these aren't even meatballs. It's crazy. And then we're going to use oregano. I should have my glasses on. Oregano, which I love dried. I have fresh in the drawer, but I like dried. It's great. So I'm going to use about a teaspoon of dried oregano. Now, anytime we use a dried herb from a plant, we want to crush it in our palm. Why are we doing that? We want to wake it up. It's been sitting in the jar. It's exhausted, and it's been dried out and sitting in the jar. You got to say, time to go to work and add flavor to our meal. So we crush it in our palm to bring it back to life and make it aromatic again, okay? Now we're gonna get to my favorite ingredient in meat or plant-based meatballs, cheese.
Yum.
Yes. So now we're gonna do a couple of handfuls, or about a cup each, of Parmigiano and Romano cheese. Now, what's the difference? Romano cheese is salty and tangy, and it comes from sheep. Sheep, curly sheep. Parmigiano Reggiano comes from cows, very special cows, very delicious milk. And it's nutty and buttery and salty too, but really it's the nut. It smells like buttered toasted nuts. Smell it. You'll see what I'm talking about. It smells like buttered toasty nuts. And one smells very tangy and almost lemony. That's the pecorino. So they smell different and they taste a little different. So we're gonna put both of those in. And now we're gonna add a little fresh garlic to this, but granulated garlic would be fine also. We're gonna use the smaller side of our grater and paste the garlic. You can also paste garlic with a knife by finely chopping it and mashing it and mushing it up with a little salt. We have so much salt in the bowl already from our cheese that I'm just grating it. Be careful of your fingertips again, okay? So we have a couple cloves of garlic, our parsley, fennel, red pepper, our ground meat or plant-based meat, our egg, and our moist breadcrumbs, all together. Stirring sauce as we go. The tomatoes will break down. They're gonna say, oh, I'm exhausted. I wanna be sauce. They're gonna start to relax in our mixture. So we're just giving them a gentle stir with our big old wooden spoon every few minutes. And now we're going to roll our meatballs. The other thing I wanted to tell you was, very important to have in your kitchen is a kitchen scale. Not for measuring your food or measuring every single ingredient, but when you're going to make things like fresh pasta, we could have made our own spaghetti today if we had a little more time. You're gonna want to know the weight of things. And if you love to bake, this is essential. They're not super expensive, and they have a mechanism on them that if you put the bowl on the scale first, it'll pretend the bowl's not there. So you can get an accurate measurement about what goes in the bowl. So those are some of the tools that even being here in this brand new place that I'm living and cooking in, these are things I made sure I had. And I had to reorder them. I had to get new ones. I made sure I had wet and dry measurements and a scale. Very important. Okay. Now we're going to roll meatballs. So we're going to put the meatballs on a baking sheet lined with parchment. This is parchment paper, and it's very special. It can go into the oven to very high temperature, and it will keep things nice and crisp and keep them from sticking. So we're going to line the pan with a little parchment, and the oven is hot to 425. We're going to take off any rings we may be wearing and mix. John, you want to come help roll some meatballs?
Okay. Oh, I gotta take off my ring.
Impossiballs. Cappy, we could take some questions while we're rolling Impossiballs.
Yeah, for sure. Let's give a couple shout outs. Let's give a shout out real quick to one of our great partners at the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and to the Boys and Girls Club of Edinburgh and Rio Grande Valley, Texas, who have served over 10,000 meals and distributed over 8,500 pounds of food.
Wow.
During this time. Big high five to you all out there.
Huge.
Yeah, for sure. We got a happy early 10th birthday, double digits to Gianna in Florida. Happy birthday.
I love double digits.
Happy birthday, Gianna. What you got
Ciao,
here?
Gianna. Okay, Chad, remember, in each quadrant, you're trying to get 6 meatballs, so don't screw it up.
Okay.
When we make burgers or we make meatballs, we want to score our meat into sections in the bowl. So that's where some of your math will come in. And we try and make equal shapes and sizes from each section that we score off so that we know when we get to the end, everything will be kind of the same. It won't look all different.
You could probably, let's see here. We got Nate, George, and Alfred in Chicago cooking with us. Thanks for taking a break from playing guitar and skateboarding today, guys. We appreciate you cooking with us. Got Kylie in Colorado, Logan in Jamaica. What's up, Logie? Sam and Stella in the Berkshires. A lot of people. We got thousands of people cooking literally all across the world. This is incredible. Chef Panajapti. Sorry if I didn't say your name right, little buddy. You've taken a bunch of these classes. Thank you.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Hey, you know what, Rach? We got someone else super special who wants to do a quick pop in and say hello. He's America's favorite weatherman. Let's do a quick hello from Mr. Al Roker. Can we cue that up in the control room?
Hello, everybody. Taking part in Rachael Ray's Yummo cooking camp. I'm Al Roker. I've got a hot tip and a cool tip for you. The hot tip is when you're cooking, make sure you turn your pot handles inward so that anybody walking by doesn't knock them over, okay? So keep those there. Now, your cool tip, when your bananas get a little too ripe, I like to slice them and pop them in the cooler, right there in the freezer, where you get a nice, cool treat. That's good eating. And everybody take part, because all that money that's raised is going to help the Boys and Girls Clubs of America and Rachael Ray's Yummo Scholarship at the Chaplin School of Hospitality at FIU. Yes, we have no bananas.
Love him.
I love that too. And we're going to do a visit together very soon. And Al, we send him our love today and his family, because Al's having a little bit of surgery today. He's good. It's just his shoulder. Everything's fine. Al's great. But I love Al, and he's been my dear friend for many, many, many years. And he's the reason I'm on TV, period. Al Roker is the person that put 30-minute meals on national television first. I was on the local news in WRGB in Schenectady, New York. But the reason I'm on national television is Al Roker inviting me to cook on the Today Show. And I love Al very much. Thank you, friend, for being a part of this. Thank you to all my friends. So many knowledgeable, loving, smart chefs and cooks have made time in their lives to share all of their knowledge and love with you guys for summer camp. I hope you got to spend as much time as you had to make family dinners with them, because they're all incredible. So thank you not only to our sponsors and to my dear love, Lee Schrager, and to you, Cappy, of course, and to all of our friends behind the scenes, but to our chefs and cooks that have made this possible. Wow, you guys, great job, great job.
Yeah, thank you all for this. We have some incredible kids, Chef Nicholas, the Wickham brothers, some incredible chefs who've joined us for every single class. Let's do a quick poll. Can we put a quick poll on the screen really quick? I'm actually curious, how many days have you been to cooking camp? We're gonna put a poll on the screen and let us know. Click on that button. It's your first one.
I just fried the meatballs, Cappy. I just want you to know they're going in the oven, and they cook about 16 minutes at 425.
Got it.
You cannot overcook, nor can you cook it like dumplings. Meatballs that are made out of beef, meatballs that are made out of meat, out of beef, or beef mixture with veal and pork. Veal and pork is very common. Traditional meatballs can be cooked in a variety of ways. In a frying pan first and then finished in the sauce, partially in the oven, or all in the sauce. They can be cooked as a dumpling, literally in the tomato sauce. That does not work as successfully with plant-based product. Plant-based product works best if we cook it quickly in a high temperature oven and let it develop a crust, let it caramelize and get some color and texture on the outside of the ball, and then only mix it with the sauce as you need it to serve. And that's what we do. So if you are making more than you need today, what you want to do is roast them to perfection for you, take them out, cool them, and only toss the amount of meatballs or plant balls that you're going to be serving at that time. Save the extra sauce and the extra meatballs or plant-based meatballs separately and combine them when you reserve them. So you can reheat the meatballs on a baking sheet on parchment in a moderate oven, not as high, like a 350 oven, until they're warmed through. And you can reheat your defrosted tomato sauce on this stovetop, combine them and toss them with the pasta, as you're gonna see how we do that today. But what I will not do is suggest cooking a plant-based meatball as a dumpling in the acidic sauce. I find that the texture of the outside of the dumpling just does not stand up as well. It's better to roast them.
Awesome. And Rach, actually, Benjamin wants to know if he can use an immersion blender to make the sauce smooth.
If you want the sauce smooth, of course. And you know, these are suggestions. Every recipe ever written in all of history, and every single person since the invention of fire has been a suggestion. What you do in your own kitchen is up to you. You're the boss, period. And you need to trust that. If you love to cook, you have to learn to trust your own instinct too. And you have to be brave enough to say, I'm gonna try it my way. Well, somebody that I like did it this way. That doesn't mean you can't do it a different way. I like pieces of tomato in my sauce. So I'm gonna let this sauce be chunky. But immersion blenders, that's like a big long stick. That's like a food processor at the end of a stick. It can make anything smooth right in the pot so you don't have to transfer it back and forth. They're really cool. I love them and I use them a ton. I don't use them on tomato basil sauce because I like a chunky consistency. But you need to be the boss of your own food.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest lesson out of appreciating the kitchen or learning to play a musical instrument or learning to draw or paint. These are all just creative arts, including cooking. Baking can be a science. Like there is math to some formulas of this will rise if you do this and it won't rise if you do that. But generally speaking, this is a forgiving form of expression that allows for you to be you and to put your own flavors in there. If I was from Venice, my family's from Sicily, but if my family had been from Venice, this tomato basil sauce could have some of the ingredients from curry powder in it. It could have things like cumin or even a little turmeric or ginger or something because it was a spice port. And it could be tossed with shrimp and seafood instead of meatballs. So depending on where you come from or your family experience or what your own palate becomes, every recipe can just be a starting off point for you to go anywhere you want. That's the wonderful thing about cooking. There's always a new way, you know, if you like rock and roll music, okay? It's the same few chords over and over, but it doesn't mean you can't put them together in a totally new way that no one ever thought of, even your most favorite band ever. Like you could come up with a way of reusing those same 3 chords over and over that none of those other people ever even thought of. And it's the kind of the same thing with cooking.
Hey, Rach, Sydney actually has a fun question. She wants to know what books you like to read.
Oh, I love mysteries. I love cookbooks from all over the world. I love to read about different cultures and different cuisines. I especially love mysteries. Harlan Coben is a friend of ours, and he's an amazing mystery writer. John le Carré, I've read so many of over the years. I love cookbooks. I do read them like fiction. I also love nonfiction about history. I like to read John Meacham and a bunch of fabulous historians. I like to read, period, and I like to read books more so than gadgets. I do read from gadgets. You know, if I would ride a plane on a very long trip or something, I would read on a Kindle. Or what's the other one called? The Fire?
No, Kindle's the thing.
Or an iPad.
Or your iPad.
Right. I've read on many screens, but I prefer holding a book.
Yeah.
I have so many favorite authors. To Kill a Mockingbird is one of my all-time favorite books. I've read and reread that several times. And Tom Wolfe, Bonfire of the Vanities, I loved and I read a few times. When I was a little girl, the first book I ever read was called The Casual Observer. Yeah. And I had the entire collection of Beatrix Potter, Peter Rabbit and all of his friends, and The Stinky Cheese Man I loved. And I was a stinky cheese woman for a long time when I worked in marketplaces and sold lots of cheeses from around the world. I smelled like stinky cheese a lot. So those are some of my favorites.
Awesome.
But I love reading books, period. And I think it's really important to continue to do that. It's different than watching movies, and it's different than playing video games. Books are a different source of inspiration, and it's not to say that those other things aren't great sources of inspiration in their own ways, but actually turning pages. I mean, I can remember reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Chronicles of Narnia with a flashlight underneath the covers. And then my mother came in and she said, if I was reading or painting a picture or drawing, I don't have to hide. I can stay awake past my bedtime and just be. So I would sit and read and read and read, and then I had to pay the price. If I would read all night, I still had to brush my teeth, get ready for school, make sure that my lessons were done. and there were no excuses. So it was a kind of an arrangement that forced me to learn a proper bedtime eventually for myself.
Hilarious. I see you're getting working on pasta, and I know you could probably school us for a whole day in it, but talk to us about your pasta.
When we cook dry pasta, we bring the water to a full boil. I like 5 to 6 quarts. There's always exceptions to this. But generally speaking, for a pound of pasta, I like 5 to 6 quarts. That's not always necessary. There's different recipes and different techniques. But generally speaking, I like 5 to 6 quarts per pound of pasta. This is my spaghetti pot that I drew. I created this because I had a very tiny stove and I wanted to be able to have a big pot.
That's what I'm using.
On the stove sideways so that you could put 2 big pots next to each other. Because if your stove is very narrow, you can't fit 2 big pots next to each other because they're round. I also like a long pot because when you're cooking spaghetti especially, it's long. And you used to have to wait and stir and stir and stir until the pot, until the spaghetti would fold down in. What we never do is break pasta. You never crush it in half. No, 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 no. You can buy short pasta or buy long pasta. And in Italian cuisine and culture, the pasta, the size of the pasta and the shape of the pasta is paired with the sauce for a reason. So that when you twirl it, it gets all through it. Or if it's big and chunky or the sauce is heavy, the pasta can match what's going on with the sauce. What we don't want to do is take long pasta that was made long for a reason and break it in half and make it small. No. We also want to put salt in the water. Why? Even though we seasoned our sauce, we didn't season the pasta. When we season the cooking water, that's the chance to season the pasta itself. The next important thing to remember is it doesn't have to be a measuring cup. I usually use a coffee cup. We always save a little starchy cooking water so we can marry the pasta to the sauce. That doesn't mean we have to get dressed up and it's a special ceremony. It means we take a little of the cooking water and mix it with some of the sauce and toss it with the pasta and some cheese, and we emulsify. We make all of that come together in a marriage of flavor and wrap around the spaghetti or whatever the pasta is. We also always undercook our pasta. So if the package of pasta that you're cooking says cook for 8 minutes, you want to cook it for 7. If it says cook it for 17 minutes, like Peachy, which is big, giant, fat spaghetti from Tuscany, it could take 17, 20 minutes. You would cook it 15 or 16 minutes. Why? Because when we marry sauce and pasta, something happens called carryover cooking. The cooking process is continuing on and on while we're mixing the sauce and the pasta all together. So if we want the pasta to be perfect, we need it to be undercooked while we're doing that process, while we're marrying those ingredients together. Cappy, you still there?
I'm still here. I was just starting my pasta, but I was just going to tell you, I actually chose, you know, we have Barilla as a sponsor, but I chose, they have this Protein Plus pasta, which is pretty cool. It's actually made with 100% plant-based protein, and I thought it was a perfect fit with our Impossiballs.
That's amazing. They have so many different varieties. You know what I love about the food industry? Well, it's a lot, but that so many companies are paying attention that people have all kinds of different diets that they follow now.
Yeah.
Grown-ups and young people alike are eating in new and different ways. Some people are pescatarians. They eat a lot of fish. Some people are flexitarians. They like to eat a little bit of everything, but in moderation. Some people are vegetarians and they like to eat mostly vegetables, but they'll still maybe eat eggs or some cheese. Some people are vegans and they eat plant-based versions of cheese and meat. And some people are like John and myself, we eat kind of everything. Like John is definitely a carnivore, believe me.
I'm a Rachael Ray.
But he loves Rachael Rayatarian. It's very funny, honey. But he definitely loves these plant-based meatballs, and he loves the plant-based burgers. In fact, I gave John a plant-based cheeseburger next to a beef-based burger, a
really?
brown burger. John not only preferred the Impossible burger, he also thought it was the sirloin burger. No kidding. Is that true, John?
100% true. I was fooled.
Hon, you want to come try the meatballs? Did you time them?
I'm gonna check mine too. I have a timer on right when you put yours in. It's been exactly 15 minutes.
But they don't need 10 minutes. They need 16 to 18. I think they could go 2 or 3 more.
Okay.
It's been exactly 15.
Oh, your timing, Cappy, it's 15?
Yeah, I put mine in right when you put yours in,
2
yeah.
3 more on our side.
Cool.
All right. So did we talk about salad dressing?
No.
Okay, so when I make this dinner, I like to make garlic bread and a big green salad. My thoughts on this are these, I guess I should say, because I have multiple thoughts. When we buy bread, if you're going to use it that day, terrific. If you're going to toast it or make croutons or garlic bread, you can buy stale bread, which will be cheaper than fresh bread. Whenever we buy bread, whatever's left of it, if it was good bread that you love, put it in the freezer in a plastic food storage bag that's made for the freezer specifically, and get all of the air out of the bag. When we make garlic bread, pre-toast the bread, then brush it with garlic butter, so crushed garlic in warm butter, or we do olive oil and butter mixed, EVOO and butter mixed with some crushed garlic. But we toast the bread first so it's not mushy on the inside. Then we brush it with a little of the garlic olive oil mixture. Then we sprinkle it with a little cheese and or herbs and put it back in the oven under the broiler in the middle of the oven just to set the cheese and get it double toasty and crunchy. When we make salads, I make dressing. This is Italian dressing, but I make dressing in a plastic storage bottle that you can literally get at dollar stores or the regular grocery store or online.
Squeezy bottle.
They're very, very cheap squeeze bottles. And I put in 1/3 of the way vinegar generally and 2/3 oil generally. Again, there's exceptions to everything, but generally. And any flavors you like. Then you always have it in the drawer and you shake it when you want it. When we bring home all of our produce on whatever the main shopping day or grocery gathering day is, or if you're lucky enough to have a garden, your big gardening day, put everything away clean and ready to use, as I always say and do. So I have all of my lettuce clean, pat dry, and ready to chop and put into a bowl. You can even make chopped salad mixtures or blends and leave it in a bag. But my tip is never dress the salad until you're ready to eat it, and only dress the number of portions you need. If only 2 people are eating salad, don't dress a huge bowl of salad. It's gonna wilt and be destroyed by the next day. So you can make a salad blend or put all the components in the fridge, but keep the dressing separate from the salad and only dress exactly what you need the time you need it. Otherwise, you end up throwing away perfectly great produce and a whole lot of money and time and labor in preparing the produce, right?
Yeah.
Okay, my spaghetti is done. So I think my meatballs are about perfect. So I'm going to take some starchy water. I'm going to take that out. That's just an empty box, John. You grab that for me. I'm going to turn off the pasta water so we don't set our pot holders, or I have a mopping pot holders in the corners of a dish towel, so we don't set that on fire. Turn the fire off first. Drain your pasta. I'm going to go slowly, piano, piano, step by step. Drain the pasta, give it a shake. Put it back in the hot pot. Then you can add olive oil or butter. I'm going to add a little butter, just like my mom did when I was a little girl, okay? A couple of pats of butter. And now we're going to add a little of our starchy liquid. And we're going to add about 1/3 of our sauce, the tomato-basil sauce. You can turn that off too, John. The sauce is done, please. And you can use a ladle or a coffee cup. My mom always used her coffee cup. We're going to add about 1/3 of our sauce. There we go.
Is there heat on under there, Rachel, or no?
I just turned all the heat off everywhere.
Got it.
And we're going to add some more cheese, grated cheese. Of each of the 2 kinds we used in the meatballs. Now we're going to take tongs and vigorously stir the pasta, the sauce, the butter, and the cheese all together. And this is how we're going to emulsify our sauce with the cheese and the pasta.
I gotta tell you, Rach, it's awfully calming just, you know, cooking with you and taking direction, and it's kind of like you're thinking for me.
Thank you. And now we have our, oh gosh, do they look perfect? Woo-wee. All right, I gotta hold these in front of the camera so everybody can see. So Kathy, what are we at, 17 minutes?
Yeah, about 17 or so.
Gorgeous. Look how crispy.
Yeah.
Crispy and beautiful. Gorgeous.
Let's compare. Did I do okay here?
Let me see. I can't see you. John won't put you, oh, there. Gorgeous.
Yes.
Gorgeous. Okay, now remember, we're only going to add the number of meatballs we're going to serve right now, remember?
All right.
So that we can save extra for later if we want. That's why we said, think as we go, think as we cook. So we're just going to give this to a few of our friends, and then we're going to save some for us, for later. So I'm going to add just about half, okay? Now we're going to take the pasta bowl and add the cheesy spaghetti with tomato sauce. Oh, woohoo! And now we're going to ladle over meatballs and more sauce. Or Impossiballs, I should say, more sauce.
Oh, this is so good.
Isn't that glorious? And we still have half a pot of sauce left. Look at that. That we can add more meatballs to later. See what I was saying? Now we can store them separately and we feel no pressure that we wasted any food. So now we have that giant bowl that will feed lots of folks that are here helping us with our house, and my mommy, who lives right up the street, who's 86, and at 84, she became a vegetarian. Although there has been a couple of nights, I have to say, she said, I really wish I could have a piece of bacon to try some chicken tonight. But at 84, she became a mostly vegetarian.
Is that a mostitarian?
It's a
Mostitarian.
So there it is, you guys. There's our spaghetti meatballs. I don't know any way to be more grateful about cooking or life than a big bowl of spaghetti and meatballs. Who doesn't love that?
I love it. You're the best, Rach. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Oh my God. Much love.